I didn't plan this. This was a primary that I turned into a rental. This was a Zillow listing where the owner was make me a deal or make me an offer.
O'Shea started with rental properties by accident, but from there, he and his wife built a 7-property portfolio while working full-time jobs.
I was terrified of finding a tenant and doing screening because I heard all the horror stories. I did all of this as trial by fire.
As you'll learn in this story, you don't need to start real estate investing with perfect knowledge or lots of money.
It takes time. You can do one a year and it will work itself out over time.
So if you're busy, unsure where to start, or worried about making mistakes, this conversation with O'Shea will inspire you to take the next step. Let's get started. So O'Shea, I want to jump into your journey and talk about, what it's been like the last 5 years or so for you investing in real estate. But I would love for people to get to know you a little bit better, first of all. So can you start with telling us, first of all, about a little bit about your real estate investing? Like, how many properties do you have? Where do you invest? And what kind of properties do you own right now?
I have 7 properties. I invest in St. Pete mostly. I got started in 2017. I didn't plan this. This was a primary that I turned into a rental.
Okay.
And I didn't buy below market, or I didn't get a deal or anything. In fact, this was a Zillow listing where the owner was make me a deal or make me an offer. Do you remember those listings?
I remember those, yes.
And usually they list it way above market, and whichever sucker is willing to make them an offer. That was me. So there was an area that was up and coming, and I really wanted to live there. My wife, then at the time girlfriend, did not like that area, but I did all the research and I really liked everything that was coming out through the city planning and everything. So I made an offer, and the neighbor, when I was touring, thought that I might have been crazy because this house has been sitting for several years. No one wants to pay that amount of money. It's not in great condition. It's just an okay house.
Yeah.
So we close. Wife's not happy. She's okay. But we have to do lots of work, and that wasn't supposed to be the plan. We're supposed to find something closer to turnkey. We don't want to live in anything and do work on it. But I thought it was the right move. So now I go hunt a contractor, and this is always a fun part. I'm not in the industry. I don't know anything. I don't know anyone. So the contractor that I get isn't 100% transparent with me on all of the costs that we're going to run into down the road. And I run over budget in a very major way on all of the nice upgrades that they pitch.
Been there, done that. I'll raise my hand as well.
Yeah. And I'm not upset. It's a beautiful house. It turned out great. We're happy with it at the end of it, but I think we wanted to spend 25 all in and just do some light cosmetic work. And I think we ended up closer to 40, maybe 45 with everything, new appliances. We changed the insulation. What else? We moved the HVAC. We got new HVAC and put it up into the attic to make more space. In the bathroom, we shifted some walls around. None of this was on the initial plan, but he came and he was like, "Wouldn't you love if it was this way? If you could do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would."
He gave you the upsell. He's like, "Wouldn't it be nice? Yeah, we could do this." Yes.
I tried to be firm initially, but then the upgrades and trying to make everyone happy with the way the house was kind of got the better of me.
Got it. So this is were you renting before that and you moved into a house, or did you own a house?
Actually, the reason I decided I really wanted a house is because I asked for a couple of extra days from my previous landlord to coordinate a move between apartments, and they said no. So I had to put all my stuff in storage for a couple of days. We were going out of the country, and I had to come back, take my stuff out of storage, and then move them again into this apartment. So I immediately started looking for houses, and I went down the rabbit hole of the message boards and trying to find the best areas in Charlotte to live. That's that story.
Got it. So you're working and living in Charlotte at that point. This is your first home that you bought to move into. At some point, we'll get to the rest of your story. You moved to St. Petersburg, Florida. But then, so this home eventually became a rental for you. But do you remember the numbers, what you paid for it up front? And I'm also curious, where you came up with the cash. Like you thought it was 25 grand and you had to spend 45. I think everybody's first deal is always like, where do you get the money for that stuff? So like, can you answer those two things? Like one, like, yeah, both of those are something I was curious about.
I invest in the stock market, and that's where I thought that I would build all of my wealth and do it slowly and steadily. I have spreadsheets of all the plans and everything, and I had a down payment and some extra. I've been saving and investing for 4 years at the time, I think. I didn't have a car. I didn't do anything crazy. So cheap apartment, very, very small. No car payment, no insurance payment. Just very simple, cheap lifestyle. And that's how I came up with that.
So were you riding bus to work, biking to work?
I was walking to work.
Nice.
Walking and biking. So when rents started increasing, I kept moving further and further away. So I needed a bike and refused to get a car because then there's also parking, and I didn't want to have to come up with that either.
Yeah, this is totally a side channel, but as someone who loves walking and biking, who a lot of people listen to this know, I try to build trails in our area for walking and biking. It's kind of a passion of mine, but just when you research how much owning a car costs, I think it's like $5 or $10 a year. I mean, it's something like that. It's a pretty big number. So if you're early in your career, you can figure out a way, even if you have to pay a little bit higher rent and live close to where, and if you're in a couple, one of you can drive a car, one of you not. I mean, that's a big deal, say $5 or $10 a year, and just be able to do some exercise.
I ended up buying the first car when I moved to Florida because there's just no way. There's no way to survive in Florida without a car.
Yes. Yep.
So that might have been six-ish years without a car. So
well done.
I was able to save a good amount. It was painful at times, not everything is close by, but I made it work.
Yeah. Well done.
The house cost $172,000. That's what I paid. It was listed for $175,000. And I won't forget because the neighbor kept, we're cool, but the neighbor kept telling me how bad of a deal it was. It was actually so bad that it didn't appraise for what I was going to pay it for. It appraised closer to $150,000. This was in 2017.
Okay. What so, if you fast forward, I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but like that house, you had about $217,000 in it, 172 plus 45 in repairs. What do you think that property's worth today? That was 2017. Now we're 2025.
Maybe 350 to 400. I don't quite know because it would sell for land today. No one's really trying to buy that in that area.
Okay.
And I'll get into that a little bit more.
Yeah, got it. Okay, cool. So I love the details here. So your first deal, I'm always curious about the first deal because everybody gets into it in different ways, and a residence where you live in it makes a lot of sense. You have to live somewhere. If you make a mistake, we all make mistakes. I made mistakes. You made mistakes. You overpay for things, but it's easier to make a mistake on your residence than it is just a pure flip or a pure rental property, right? So I think that's pretty wise for you to do that. And so, all right. So I do want to circle back to the whole real estate strategy, but in terms of like your life and what you were doing at that point, talk to me about kind of your career, what your professional expertise is. I know you always talk about being a spreadsheet jockey or a spreadsheet nerd, which I appreciate as well. Like, tell me about what you do in your day life, your work life.
I was in banking, and I'm still in banking, and I was working uptown in Charlotte. Every day, I would spreadsheet things out to kind of figure out if this is the best way to do a certain thing.
Yep.
And the house was on a list in a spreadsheet with multiple other areas and houses and all of that, and it bubbled to the top. Strangely enough, I couldn't have predicted, all of the things that came with that particular interaction with the contractor and the overages and everything that we spent that we probably shouldn't have. But I did think that in time that everything would have caught up with market values and what I put into the house. We were living there for enjoyment. It wasn't an investment like that immediately. I thought one day maybe we'd rent it, but it wasn't supposed to be an immediate turnaround. And we didn't need the equity right away or anything like that. So I was fine with doing a very silly thing.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to make a mistake, it's better to make a mistake in a really nice location. I think that's a good rule of
Right.
thumb because I've done this. My wife and I did the same thing. We bought a property in 2009. That was our first residence house that we lived in after living in the fourplex, the house hack that we lived in when we got married. And we over improved that thing as well. And like,
Yeah.
just gutted it and repaired everything. The house was probably worth 155 at the time. And we had
Hmm.
160 in it. We were over budget. But then that property now is worth 285, 300. It used to rent for 950. Now it rents for 18. It could rent for 1800. We have it rented for 1650. So I guess my point is if you're in a really high demand area with low supply, that's where you want to go, like be over budget as opposed to I've been over budget on some really bad locations where it's like a money pit. I'm never going to get my money out of that. So
Yeah.
there's a lesson there.
So today, if you were to walk by the house, you'd see three-story duplex, my tiny bungalow, three-story
Mm,
duplex,
there you go.
apartment complex, 100 unit, 50
Yeah.
unit apartment complex, and maybe another one or two bungalows of people that held out.
Yeah. What part of Charlotte is that in, by the way? I just happen to know some of the neighborhoods.
It's on the is that the north side? It's Optimus Park, Noda area.
Noda. Okay. Got it. Awesome. All right. So you're a spreadsheet nerd. You know how to optimize spreadsheets and finances. The other thing I wanted to get into before we get into the rest of your real estate journey is you were born in Jamaica, right?
I
And
am. Well,
and so
I was born in New York. I grew up in Jamaica. I spent
that's
most
right.
of my life
Okay,
in
born in New
Jamaica.
York. Born in New York. So I'm fascinated by that part of your story too. So I would love to take a detour there if you don't mind, and just tell some of that and how that journey has kind of brought you to where you are now.
I moved to Charlotte when I was 24, I think, 24. So most of my upbringing is in Jamaica. Most of my friends are Jamaican or are still in Jamaica. Everyone I talk to on a daily basis is more or less Jamaican or has some Jamaican background. So that's where I got my start. I didn't really look into books or anything on the real estate side. I just did what I was doing in terms of, keep your head down, go to work, save, invest,
Yeah.
live scrappy or cheap or, not overindulge in things. And that's just kind of the Jamaican way. So I still have some of that in me, even though, sometimes I might have some extra money. I'm really, really hard pressed to spend it on, on
Yeah.
anything.
Go back to your roots.
I
What?
think I still back calculate. I still convert everything to JMD and
Yeah.
see if is this too much money for this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you mentioned the work thing and that whole situation. So I wanted to go there because part of your journey has been you've been working a full time job. Your wife works in the medical field, has a full time job. So you've been kind of grinding on the side, doing real estate investing. So could you talk about your journey from that first property that you lived in and how you got the bug to start buying more properties? You got 7 now. Like what did that journey look like from going from that first one to that next stage?
So the first one didn't really spark it for me yet because I hadn't seen the equity growth or anything. In fact, I had to leave it to move down here, and I was terrified of finding a tenant and doing screening because I heard all the horror stories. I hadn't yet discovered Bigger Pockets or, Rich Dad Poor Dad or any of that stuff yet. I did all of this as trial by fire.
Yeah.
And I think it's the best way to learn, honestly.
You touch
But
the fire, you learn, right? You get burned a little
yeah,
bit. You learn not to do that. Don't do
yeah.
that. Do
So,
this.
so I learned all the mistakes instead of reading and figuring out that, yeah, I can absolutely do this because there are some lessons that you learn the hard way
Hmm.
despite thinking you know everything. We moved in 2019. So I got an exemption from work to be remote. They were very gracious in allowing that for a while. And I came down here, stayed with the wife, working remotely and living in an apartment. We both had no objections to that. But then there were some triggers that just made it not feel like home. So we went out looking for places. And this is Florida, completely new territory to me. So I needed block house. I needed newer roof. I needed no flood zone. And I then discovered that I have a buy box for Florida.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. And the next house we bought was our second primary. But, we didn't bite off more than we could chew. It was a nice cheap-ish house. It was 243,000.
And so
And
this
this
one,
is in
this is again
2019.
your principal residence. So again, you needed a place to live. You're living in an
Right.
apartment. I
Right.
love this theme, right? Some people just make it complicated, like, oh, how do you get started? How do you make progress? Well, you can just move into it.
Accidentally.
You can move into another house. Like that is progress. And I
Yeah.
do want to ask you about your buy boxes. I've had episodes where I talk about what my buy box is, and every market is a little bit different, but it makes sense why you would not be in a floodplain in St. Petersburg, Florida. I get that with the hurricanes. What about the block house, and what about the new roof, where like kind of non-starters, you really wanted to have those things when you were looking for a property?
We're really close to the coast. I grew up in Jamaica. All the houses are block houses, so we weather hurricanes very reasonably in those block houses. I didn't know if a stick built house would have done relatively well. We haven't been hit by a hard hurricane in a very long time, except for last year. So, last year we did better than a lot of people. It was very sad, but I think making sure that we stuck to the buy box had a lot to do with how well we did. And the buy box has since evolved since that first purchase in Florida. No, I don't like trees in the yard.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, I've learned that the hard way as well, because the hurricane knocks trees over, or just wind in general knocks trees over.
Right. And then that can fall on the house, and you have your block house and you think everything's perfect, but your foundation's torn up, and it falls and destroys the roof. So buy box has evolved.
Yeah.
That first house did well, but there's a big tree in the front yard. We didn't do very many renovations to that. I might have added some backyard work to make it nice, but that was for us. We were still, despite having that one rental in Charlotte, which I gave to a property manager, I did not want to go through tenant screening remotely and, go show properties and figure that whole thing out. And I'll get a little bit more into why I still haven't gone down that road.
Yeah.
But
Got it.
this current house was just for us to live in. We had a rental, and great. The equity gets paid down. The equity gets built up. The debt gets paid down. By the way, I know you don't necessarily recommend this, but I did a 15-year on that first house.
Oh, okay.
I didn't
What was
want to.
it? Was lower interest, and just you paid it down faster? Or was that your motivation for
Right.
doing that?
Rates were around 4.5-ish at the time. It just, the payment was fine. So
Yeah.
we did that payment.
Hey, nothing. I'm not opposed to paying it off faster. One of the reasons I've done a podcast episode on this is I like 30-year loans if you're going to start growing your real estate career, because then you're minimizing your payment, so that if you have to fall back, if you have to lower your
Right.
rent, or if you have vacancy.
I understand.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand.
So,
It's
just
a
for
good
everybody else who's
safety net,
listening.
but it's my
Yeah.
one house, and I'm
Yeah.
living
Makes
there.
sense. Makes sense.
I went for the 15.
Yeah, no problem. All right, cool. So you got two houses now. You got one in Charlotte, managed by a property manager. What was, by the way, was that positive cash flow at that point, or were you having? Do you remember what it was like on the cash flow or the finances for that
No,
property?
it was not. It was not positive cash flow. So there were frequent discussions with my now wife about if we should keep this or sell this. But I was attached, and we did this big reno, and I just wanted to keep it. And I
Got it.
knew all the things that I invested in the area for had not yet happened. So the light rail was supposed to run past that house, and I was supposed to be able to walk to work, walk to the light rail, and then hop off and be right there at work. The light rail did not open until after I moved.
Got it. You
And
wanted
the
to see your thesis through. You wanted to see your investment thesis through.
Right. And all the development that was supposed to happen along the light rail didn't start until 2020. So, I had to hold to get everything to be what I thought it would be when I went to the city website and looked at all of their plans and development timelines and maps and all of that.
Got it. Okay. So you're sitting there with two properties. What happened from there? So how long did you live in the second house, and where did you start accumulating more rentals?
I think we had both been saving, and this was 2021 is when we had enough to buy another rental. By this time, we were break even, and I was watching Zillow, and the equity was growing, and it was being paid down really, really rapidly on the 15-year. So I was happy. we were saving and investing, and stock market was doing okay, so we had some funds. So the next house we bought was a rental, was a straight rental. We didn't move anywhere yet. We got a really good deal at the time. I think it was close to downtown St. Pete, which I really like for an investment location. Good tenant pool. Found a block on Slab House that was 2008 construction or 2009 with a newer-ish roof. Everything about it was really solid. So we put an offer in and they accepted at market rate. This wasn't a deal.
Yeah.
It was
Still
just
a
the
lot of
numbers
competition,
were
a lot of competition at that point too, right?
right.
Yeah, people were
Right.
making multiple offers, and yeah. So what did you pay for that one, and what do you remember what the rent was when you started?
It was 200,000 or like 199, and we got a $2,000 seller credit.
Got it. What did you end up renting it for once you bought it?
So this is where I decided to keep going back with property managers. I rented it for 1,500 maybe, and someone showed up and asked if I was renting it while I was working on it, because I did this one with my dad. He came up for maybe 3 weeks with me. It was in decent shape, but it wasn't. I wouldn't want to live there, so I wouldn't put anyone else in there. The walls were, you know, brown and stained and stuff, and the floors were gross. The cabinets just had stuff in it. There were roaches. It was, it was worth what it costed.
Yeah.
So it needed some work. And one of the bathrooms had a walk-in tub. The the owner was older and needed a walk-in tub, and I think their partner had passed, so that's why they just wanted to get out of that and get into a condo. They weren't super distressed or anything. They just wanted out. So we just found it, got in at the right time, did some work on it. We didn't change the cabinets. We changed the cabinet doors. It was in decent shape.
Mm-hmm.
Just, some light cosmetic stuff, repainting, cleaning up the yard, getting rid of the roaches, cleaning ground, doing a deep clean on everything. I took all the outlet covers off and wiped them off and cleaned the baseboards.
Got it sparkling for to make it showable, and then you happen to have a tenant just found you before you even finished. Is that what happened, or how did that go?
Right. So when we took out the walk-in tub, and we listed it for sale, the neighbor across the street saw that and said that had he known that we were going to sell that, he would have told us. And then we got talking, and he asked us what we were going to do with the house, if we were moving in. I told him, no, it's a rental. And then he said, I know someone. We're actually business partners, and I would love to live across the street from my business partner. So I said, sure, give him my number and we can have a conversation. That went well for about 18 months. And then the business relationship dissolved with both of those guys.
Yes.
And the guy that was renting from me, he had some health issues, and he wasn't working with that other guy anymore. So, you know what happens next.
Yes. Yep. He moves on. Is that rental still working well? Even so, you had to move out after 18 months. But has that been easy to rent that property? Has it been a desirable place?
Yeah, I actually way underpriced that property. So what happened when he got sick was he kept asking for extensions, and he can't work, he doesn't get paid. So I was too nice, probably, and I let him stay for several months without paying, and then he eventually kind of caught up, and then he moved out. And I decided I didn't want to deal with that anymore because I'm too soft. I can't kick a sick guy out
I know.
on the street. It's just not me.
Yep.
But a property manager probably might. So if I don't have that relationship with them, then I'll let the property manager make that decision and figure that out. So when we cleaned it up and re-rented it, it actually rented for $2,500.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Yeah, it's a big difference.
Okay.
So this might be the COVID run up. This might be me not pricing the property appropriately, because he did ask for a break on rent, and I know the neighbors, and they're gonna be taking care of the place, of course I can cut him a break on rent for just
Right.
a little bit, right? Anyway,
Right.
I was apparently robbing myself of at least 500 a month.
Yeah. Well, another lesson though, right? You got somebody in the house. You move forward, and so you're now you're at house three. You're still living in house number two.
Mm-hmm.
I know at some point I've gotten to know you better inside our rental property mastery in our community. One of the things you are really good at is you've done short-term rentals. So I'm curious. These have all been long-term rentals so far.
Right.
When did you make that leap? When did you decide to like get into the short-term rental or the mid-term rental game, and why did you do that?
So after the second one went well, and we had the guy move in, and rents are paying the mortgage, we decided to build our house, our new primary. So we started on that in 2021, not long after getting the rental. What I did was I did a cash out refinance on that first house because this is 2021. This is the equity boom and rates are
Yeah.
super low. I refinanced that house, took maybe 40, 50,000 out to help with a down payment on a new construction. And my payment was not too far off what it was before, maybe 400 a month. So, it was an easy decision to make. That took about a year. There were some issues with supply chain. When that house got done, we turned our then primary into a short-term rental
Okay.
because we didn't want any of the furniture at the new house.
There you go. So it was a furniture play. You had all your nice furniture from
Right.
you got to buy new furniture for the new house and then use your furniture that you liked at the existing house.
There were some learnings that I had to get through with the short-term rentals. It's a learning curve, but systems and processes eventually saved me from myself. And
What were some of those lessons? Like as a new short-term rental investor, were there any lessons, mistakes, things that came up that you had to learn the hard way?
so I had one code, I think, one code on the door for everyone. I not that someone showed up when they shouldn't have when someone else was there, but I had issues with people running into each other, like the cleaners, and people not gone yet, and just there were some scheduling conflicts that I needed to manage a little bit better, and I didn't send a message to follow up with people to say, hey, this is checkout time. So they didn't realize that it was today that they needed to check out and not tomorrow. Otherwise, they would have asked for another day. So now everything is fully automated, having discovered a couple of short-term rental folks that walked me through the process, like Rob and Tony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So everything's good on the short-term rentals, and I didn't want to deal with a tenant situation anymore at that time. So I think I wanted the money, but I didn't want to have to go vet and screen a tenant, and they're great, and then some issue shows up, and then they don't pay, and I still have to cover the mortgage.
Yeah. Because you have a property manager on the other two properties. So your Charlotte one and your second rental that you bought, the third property, you've got a property manager handling the long term, and so you're going to do this yourself, and you and your wife are, and you're like, okay, if I'm going to do that, I'm just going to do short term rental and
So at the time, I didn't have a property manager yet. I just decided I don't want to deal with whatever I'm currently going through with a tenant.
Okay.
I'll just do guests.
Got it.
But after that situation resolved itself, I definitely got a property manager right away. So I'm doing the short term rental, figuring out how to not have to deal with a tenant situation and working through that tenant situation at the same time.
All right. Was one of the big allures of short-term rentals is that I'll just make up some numbers. If your long-term rentals $2,000 a month, people might say, well, you could net make $4,000 a month because you're doing a short-term rental. So, have you seen that general trend play out? And if so, what is the difference, or what's the delta between what you've seen on a long-term rental versus a short-term rental in your case on your properties?
That was generally true in 2021, maybe a little bit into 2022. And I'm sure it was like that in 2020, but things are getting a little more tight. You're having to do a lot more. You're having to offer a lot more to your guests in order to command that high rent. So your place has to be modern and funky looking and cool. It can't just be a house with beds and towels and furniture and
It's got to have a vibe. There's a certain vibe.
Electricity, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You
If
have
you're
to have
talking to,
amenities.
you got to make something fun, and yeah, I do want to get into a little bit more of that. The this first property kind of got the bug, but how many short term rentals have you done since then? Because you've learned a lot about this business. I mean, that's kind of your, I would say, it's your expertise now. It's like that's sort of the thing you've leaned into. Is that, would you say it that way as well?
I would say I'm 50-50,
Okay,
but I have no interest in self-managing the long-term rentals. So
right.
if I find a good deal that works as a long-term rental, then I will go get it. But I don't want to manage it.
How do you distinguish between a good long term rental and a good short term rental? What is the fork in the road that says this is one or the other for you in your buy box?
Probably location. So location, ability to install amenities, the look and feel of the house. I just don't want, a regular house on a regular street that looks the same as all the others, unless it's a really good deal. And then, we could do 100 to 200 a night, and that would pay the bills because it's a really good deal.
So the ones that you could do amenities to, they're in a more funky location that are walkable
Hmm.
somewhere. What's the
Hmm.
typical rate in those kind of properties today? Like it's going to change over time, but so 100 to 200 might be like a kind of a run of the mill, kind of boring kind of Airbnb that's not as competitive versus what's the upside on that?
I have seen maybe 700-800 in busy season on nice rentals in the St. Pete area, but this is in spring and around busy times, like when there's a festival or some events are happening. Summers, that's when you see some peaks, but it's not all year. So all year you might just do okay, but you have to prioritize for the spring break and busy season.
Right.
So it's seasonal, just like other areas where you probably go in the winter for that for ski season, and summer might be okay, but the rest of the year is kind of dead. So here it's spring, and when everywhere else is cold, people come here to the beach, and that's when we do well.
So kind of lessons learned in short-term rentals. I'm hearing the cleaner is like the number one. Figuring out the
Right.
cleaner and the schedule is like a huge deal. Figuring out
Cleaner,
price point.
handyman,
Handyman, yes,
scheduling,
exactly. Scheduling.
scheduling, messaging. Those
Okay.
things were very key in making sure that everything was working well and
Luckily,
automated. And
there's software and there's digital locks and there's ways to solve this, but you
right,
gotta get into that. You gotta figure out those little systems and processes. But
right.
that is, you figured that out. So it sounds like you kind of got the operations down. I want to talk about how you scaled this because in our story here, we're at like 3 properties, 4 properties, but you ended up now today when we're talking, you have 7 properties and you've acquired more. So I remember having a conversation with you in RPM and Rental Property Mastery about just this idea of scaling and how at some point everybody who's in the builder stage runs out of money where you're buying properties, you're making down payments, then you're like, I don't have any more down payment. I have to wait another year or two to
Right.
save up a down payment. And I remember you kind of bumping up against that too, just like we all have. And you had to start thinking about how do I keep scaling and get the money? And you had to get a little more creative. So could you talk about that part of your career and what went through your head in that process?
I did a cash out refinance on the second primary, not to buy the third primary, but to buy a dedicated short term rental. And that one was doing well after having learned on the first, and it was going okay. After freaking out and figuring things out
Yeah.
and getting good with the systems and processes, we did a cash out refinance and got the second Airbnb, and this would be property 4. And we set that up, furnished it. At the same time, we're saving and investing or cash. We don't touch any of the rental property profits or cash. We let that sit. I think we may have taken a little bit out to make up for the rest of the down payment. We may have used it to furnish because it wasn't that much. It wasn't that much savings. We weren't, making a killing or anything. It was just a couple $100 a month. And we got that short term rental. So that is 4. And then they're all kicking off some cash, some decent cash. This is in 2022. So we moved into our third primary. We cash out the second primary and buy our fourth rental property.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. So you've got the new construction. You're living in the new construction house. You've kept your other two residences, and you've also bought two dedicated rentals. So you got 5 properties, including your residence now, and that sort of connects the dots now. So you're in the short term rental business on 2. You're in the long term rental business on 2 properties, and you got your personal residence. You're balanced. You're like you're a dual threat athlete. You got the long term rentals and the short term rentals both going on.
So I don't think we're going to be able to move out of our current primary and rent that,
Yeah.
because I don't think the market's there for that. We probably overdeveloped it and we'll need to sell to move into the next one if we need to. It's too many bedrooms and bathrooms and space. But the short-term rentals are spitting off decent cash. So we wait about a year, and in 2023 we pool all of the funds from all of the properties and we buy a long-term rental. It was a really good deal in an up-and-coming neighborhood pretty close to downtown, but it was really cheap. I think it was the same price as the one that we got close to downtown in 2021. So I couldn't pass it up. It was a multiple offer situation, and somehow my agent managed to pull it out. We probably offered 30,000 more than asking. So the last house we bought for 330, it was a short-term rental, and this house we bought for 230, long-term rental. It's probably worth 330-ish, all fixed up. Yeah, the short-term rental was turnkey. There isn't much of a story there. It was turnkey. I furnished it, threw it out there. It was working at the time.
So the 230 house, did you have to do any repairs to that? And if so, what did that cost?
Yeah, we had to do all of the repairs.
Okay.
The roof was good. The AC was good. Nothing else was good.
Okay.
So we had to. It was a complete gut, almost down to the studs. Some of the walls were decent, so we left those. Changed all the doors, floors, appliances, kitchen, bathrooms, scraped popcorn. That's how granular we had to get with that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it cost 50, right around 50, including all of the supplies that we had to buy, the tiles, appliances, just everything.
So maybe like 280,000 in it, somewhere in there. 230 plus 50,000 repairs, and it's worth about 330 after you do the work. So you ultimately bought it at a discount, some sort of discount from the full price, but you added value. So you bought a fixer upper, did some work to it, added value, and now you have some equity above and beyond what you paid for the property.
Right. So we did a refinance on that, a cash out refinance. I probably should have waited to season it. So I'm still learning lessons. We're at property, I don't know what this is, 5, but I'm still learning lessons. I did not season that property, so the rate was expensive and the fees were really high. But we got enough out to go put a down payment on this current short-term rental that we're working on today.
For those who don't know what seasoning means, O'Shea, what do you mean by that? Just so they'll understand that.
So I reached out to 10 lenders, and they all said you need to have this property for 6 months, or you need to have filed to show that you're getting rental income on your tax returns. And we did not have that. We had just completed the reno and gotten a tenant in maybe 3 months ago. But there was one lender willing to do that, and he was happy to take our high fees and give us a high rate in order to give us some money, and I was happy to take it.
Yeah, what just so people understand what a high rate means. At that point, what was that interest rate? What were the market rates compared to that?
I think we could have probably gotten 8. I got 9.5, and then had to pay 2 or 3 points. We cashed out about 270, so just all of our reno budget, so the cash that we put in on the renovation, we got that back.
And what did that property rent for once you got it all stabilized like that?
It was actually very good, because I moved some furniture into it from another place, and some people were happy to have that furniture. It wasn't everything. It wasn't like an Airbnb, but it was a couple of beds and a couch. And I put TVs in all the rooms to stage it for pictures, and the person that rented it was happy to have it with the furniture. So I
Got it.
moved it out.
Perfect.
It got 2,800, so not too bad.
Yeah, there you go. So you're kind of close to the 1% rule in Florida for a rental house. That's not
Right.
bad.
The problem was the rate.
The rate, yes. Well,
Yeah.
you can. Yeah, I know some investors say you want to marry the property and date the rate, right? So you're doing a short term date with this 9.5% interest rate. You gotta ditch that 9.5 at some point.
I'm waiting for rates to get to where I thought they would get to at this point before
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're having a little bit of
before
pain
pulling
until
the
then.
trigger on a refi.
Yeah, I understand. Well, great. Well, so kind of wrap up that part of the story, and we'll kind of talk about where you are today. So you use that money to buy another short term rental. So you're really in the short term rental game. You've learned your buy box there. You kind of have some long term rentals, some short term rentals. Was there a point when it sounds like you had money from the refinance there, but remind me when you got to that point where you're like, I want to keep buying more properties, but I don't have enough capital at the moment. Like, where did that moment come in?
So when we bought the short term rental and did some fixing up, we spent some money on the backyard. We didn't do the interior yet. We spent all our money making it nice on the outside, and we ran out of cash in 2023. So the property did well. It covered its mortgage and then some, but it wasn't doing that well where we could save a whole new down payment for another property. And I wanted to keep doing the one a year. So fast forward to 2024, we're getting close to the middle of the year, and I don't see how we're going to fund the next deal. So I took one of your courses, your Deal Finder courses. The creative finance aspect of it kind of stood out to me. So I found a deal because I sent some mailers out and people reached out to me, and I just asked if they were willing to do seller finance. And he said, yeah, I'll do seller finance, but I have a balloon. I have a need for some funds in a year. So I'll do a balloon with you in a year. So I worked out some terms with him. I didn't like the 1 year. So I negotiated in principal only for the year so that I could get the balance on the house low enough to where refinancing wouldn't be too difficult. And I actually took a partner on this deal as well because I didn't have the cash to take it all down. Houses are now 400-ish thousand close to downtown. So this one we got for 420. So to take this down conventionally, I'm looking at 80 plus fees, close to 100. So I went straight to the seller and we did 50,000 down and principal only for a year of 2,000 a month.
So just to clarify for people, you bought this property for 420. You paid $50,000 down, but that $50,000 went to the seller. So they got that cash money at closing. Typically, you'd go get another loan and pay them the rest of the balance at closing. But in this case, you negotiated with the seller for short-term seller financing. So the balance you owed of 370, you negotiated to pay over the next year. You're going to pay 2,000 a month, and then whatever you owed in a year, you're going to pay the full balance. But what you did,
Right.
because it's a pretty aggressive balance, 1 year is a pretty aggressive timeline. You negotiated so that every time you pay $2,000, that reduces what you owe by $2,000. So
Right.
every month, at the end of the year, you're paying down $24,000 in principal. So did I understand that story right? Did I get it right?
Right. Yes, that's exactly
Okay.
right. So with all the work that we done to the house, I think it's worth 450. So, a lender should feel pretty comfortable refinancing out the note at 350 with that much cushion.
Got it. Well, that was creative. Talking to the seller and just asking that question. That was pretty cool. The other thing you did that was pretty cool, and I remember having a hot seat where we were one-on-one talking about this, was bringing in a partner because you had $80,000, 50,000 down payment plus 30,000 in repairs that you didn't have in your bank account. So some people would just say, well, I just can't invest anymore. And your attitude was, well, I think there's a way that I could bring in somebody else. And instead of me getting 0% or 100% of no deal, you're going to get, you're going to share in the deal with somebody else and give them some of the profits with you. And so can you talk about that? How you thought about that? Where were you able to come up with somebody to even put up $80,000 on a deal with you?
So I put together a pitch deck and I was soft shopping it with the family to make sure that, this is okay. how does this look? Can you correct it? And then they saw all the numbers on everything, and a couple of the family members were interested, and they wouldn't lend. They preferred, but generally, most of them prefer to get some of the deals so that we could, talk through the numbers, and everyone can learn about the deals and everything. So I have an uncle who I was just talking through the numbers with, and he found this one very, very interesting, but wanted to, do half of it. I could either do the deal and not have any money for renovation, or split the deal and then renovate the house and then try to get decent rents in the market. So I split the deal with him, and it's been going great. He doesn't ask any questions really. He's just like, yeah, it looks good. Thanks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's not in it for the short term, or needs to see a quick return on anything. And I think we'll keep doing deals if he has patient capital like this and wants to keep being patient while we work through the timelines of getting a return on our investments.
Did you have any doubts or any fears in your own head about, like, am I going to be able to get money? Do I feel like, should I go ask people for money? Was there any hesitation that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. Why would anyone give me money? They can go invest it themselves, right?
Right.
Or put it in. They could go find deals or invest it in the stock market on their own. But it turns out that people would rather invest with other people, and they do all the work and they just get the return.
Yeah, be a passive investor. They know you, they like you, they trust you, and they understand the deal. I tell people that, and it's hard to believe that there's more money out there than deals. Like if you're a deal finder like you are, and you're a trustworthy person like you are, there's more money out there waiting to do deals with you than there are deals. And that's a sort of a mental shift that we all have to go through. But you're definitely.
Yeah, I definitely had to go through that, because I wasn't sure that there was money out there, first of all, and that people would want to invest passively, second of all. And thirdly, that they would trust me with it. It was good validation
Absolutely.
that the story that I put together was interesting enough.
Well, there's a lot of details to joint ventures and partnerships. I'm going to put a link in our show notes and our description about, I did an interview with John Schaub, who's right down the road from you, down in Sarasota, Florida. He was a mentor of mine, and I talk about him a lot in terms of this kind of deal where you bring in a money partner. So if you're interested in the logistics of that, I did a conversation with him just talking details about, there's a lot of different ways to form joint ventures like that. But if you're interested in going down the rabbit hole of those kinds of deals, like O'Shea had to do to learn how to do that, I'll put a link there. I want to, while we have the remaining time here, though, Shay, like you brought us to the present, and thank you for being so detailed about all the deals.
Sure.
And I think the details are helpful. People can see, like,
Yeah,
all right,
if I can help one person with my mistakes, then I will die happy.
well, not only mistakes, you've done a lot of things right. You had some instincts early on that, and you had to work it out between you and your wife to figure out, like, let's keep this property. It's not, and you've used your equity and you reinvested it. You've continued moving forward. You've gotten creative with the financing. I mean, you've done so many things right, and I think the fruits of that, which I'm really proud of you on, is here you are sitting here. You own properties that have grown in wealth. You've got a certain amount of equity. You've also got, savings that you've made in your 401k and other money. So you've got to this point where you're still building, but you got a pretty good foundation now. And I was just curious if you could talk about where you are in your life now. When you and I had a conversation before we were getting ready for this, it really struck me. It was just talking about what some of your goals and aspirations, as if it was to have time to, like, in the middle of the day, to build pillow forts with your kids and go to the zoo in the middle of the day. And so can you talk about, like, what your aspirations are from here and how you hope to kind of turn what you have now into the next phase of your investing journey, and what that personally looks like too?
When we started this conversation, I was telling you about when I was living in Charlotte and working, and then they graciously allowed me to work remotely for a certain amount of time. Well, that's up, and I had to move on and find another job. And I didn't like that feeling of being up against a gun on having to make decisions that I don't like. So I still want the time freedom to spend time with the kids, or go do pickups or drop-offs if I want. So the strategy is really to increase cash flow to the point where I do have that freedom, or we can take a year off and go do a mini retirement or an extended vacation, maybe go back to Jamaica and really immerse the kids in
Yeah.
the culture so that they understand where my wife and I grew up, and they can, like some of the things that we like, because we try to get some of the foods. It's just not their favorite yet, but I think,
They will learn. They will learn
yeah,
when they get immersed in it. They'll be like, "Ooh, this is good."
right. You have it every day,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I still am working on that time freedom. I'm not there yet. We had a discussion about some other funds that would come due from me leaving the previous job and figuring out how to use that to get some time freedom back. But I'm still running through the spreadsheets for that.
Yeah,
I haven't
yeah.
lots of iterations that I could do with that. So
The way I see it, O'Shea, and you can tell me how you feel about it too. But you're at a good point. Like you're. I always talk about the phases of investing. You go through the starter phase. You did your starter phase. You touched the fire. You learned how to get started. You build a network. You're in the builder phase where you've built wealth. You've harvested some of that wealth to buy more properties. You've got bought one property per year or more. This journey we're on is a life journey. You've got your wife, your kids, your career. Like how do you, if you were talking to people who are also kind of in the journey, they're starters, they're builders, how do you see balancing those two things, like the emotional, this is just why I'm doing this thing, and the spreadsheet part of real estate? Maybe you probably have some good insight on that.
that's a great question, because I do look at the spreadsheets and then I make an emotional decision anyway.
As
And
do I.
we have to decide for ourselves what we're trying to optimize for. And sometimes the numbers are not always what you are optimizing for. And that's why it's so difficult, because I could put the spreadsheet together and it will tell me exactly what I need to do. Leave everything be, don't touch anything, come back in 20 years and be extremely happy. Or, I could look back in 20 years and wish I took some time off and spent more time with the kids and went to Disneyland for a week in the middle of the year and took them to the beach more. So it's a personal decision. It's a personal thought process that everyone has to go through to figure out where they are in their lives and their journeys and figure out what they're optimizing for. And right now, I think I'm optimizing for time with the family and some more freedom, because my wife and I both worked really hard and we've missed some things and we wish we could get them back. And now we have the opportunity to shift gears a little bit and try to optimize for our time.
You said it really well. You got to know what you're optimizing for. Real estate investing is wonderful. Financial independence is wonderful, but ultimately it's just a tool to get you that time with your kids, the time doing what matters to you. That's how you measure life. And it's hard to quantify that. All right. So final question I have for you is, those who are also in the journey, maybe a couple steps behind you, or maybe where you are too, do you have any advice or any kind of main lesson you've learned from this journey you've been on the last 5 or 6 years?
That it takes time. It just takes time to play itself out. It's not a get rich quick scheme or anything like that. You could do really good research on your deals and try to buy them deeply, but everything worked out for me over time. I bought that first deal over market, and time just played itself out, and the mortgage got paid down over time, and then we got equity again to buy the next one over time. So just, you can do one a year and it will work itself out over time.
All right, O'Shea, if people wanted to connect with you afterwards, you're in St. Petersburg, Florida. You're doing deals. Like, if people wanted to connect with you, what's the best way for them to stay in touch? And I'll put a link to any of this in the show notes.
Probably on Instagram. It's O'Shea.Gordon. I don't really, do a whole bunch of real estate content or anything, but if you want to message me or have questions on the area, I'd be happy to connect and talk.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time. This has been fun, and I know this has been a very helpful conversation, inspiring for a lot of people, and can't wait to see what's up next for you.
Thank you. Thanks. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. In this episode, you learned how O'Shea grew a 7-property portfolio, 1 property at a time, over 7 years. But you might be asking yourself, how does someone like him finance their deals, especially when money gets tight? So in the next video, I show you an investor-friendly loan known as the DSCR loan that lets you grow your rental portfolio using the rental income, not just your personal income. If you're watching on YouTube, click on the thumbnail above me here. Or if you're listening to the podcast, you can click on the link in the podcast or YouTube description below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.